Hey, welcome to this podcast. This is Jonathan Foust here, and I'm delighted that you have joined in. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. Before we launch in with the meditation and then an introduction to this talk, which is an oldie but a goodie, a few announcements. First of all, I always like to acknowledge and thank the Insight Meditation community of Washington for hosting this, and to our producer, Glenn Harrison, for his technical expertise in delivering uh, these ones and zeros to you. Also, a big thank you to Rita Moran, our mindful movement leader. If you'd like to join Rita for mindful movement before this class, you can check out the link for her Zoom class on my website or on my Facebook page. Also, just to let you know, I have a newsletter, a monthly and a weekly, if you're interested. And also, just thank you for your support. This is all offered freely in the spirit of generosity, in the spirit of Dana. The essential teachings are that there shouldn't be a price on these teachings because they're priceless. So they're offered freely. And if you feel like supporting me, thank you. I appreciate that. And finally, in terms of shameless promotion, just a reminder, the countdown is on for the Year of Living Mindfully program that starts in September. Applications are due June 1st. It's primarily a DC-based program, although I am looking at doing a remote option for a small cohort. So it's a year long of practice that's about sustaining attention on compassion and kindness and mindfulness for the whole year, and doing it in relationship with other people who want to do the same thing. It's an amazing ride. This is the 11th year I'm offering it. So you can find that link on my website as well. Okay, I think that's it for shameless promotion. The topic that we're going to dive into is on the art of yes. What does it mean to consent to whatever's happening? So, without further ado, let's take the next 13 minutes for a little Zen pop quiz meditation. You might first take a moment just to check in with your body and sense how it might need to move or stretch. Are there any little alterations to your posture that might help you to settle in? And what we're focusing on here is present moment awareness. And perhaps the most reliable doorway is turning your attention to this whole realm of feeling and sensation. There are 5 doorways, actually 6 according to Buddhism. One doorway is to open your attention to sound. And just take a moment just to notice 360 degrees, all the sounds around you. Another doorway is sight. If you have your eyes closed, notice the quality of the light beyond your closed eyes, perception of light or movement. Yet another doorway is the doorway of feeling, and you might just sense externally air against your skin, pressure points where you're sitting. And then internally, this whole realm of pressure, warmth, coolness, tingling, pulse, vibration. Another doorway is taste. Is there any lingering taste that you can perceive? Opening to smell. Are there any predominant smells? Any olfactory information that you can pick up? And you might think of the brain as a sense organ as well. Just feel this internal computer that's taking all of this raw data, making it available to awareness through the realm of location, determining whether you feel safe or not, maybe generating a story or two. And in this realm of feeling, of sounds, of sight, of touch, taste, smell, of cognizing, can you sense who you are as the observer of all this phenomena, all happening by itself? It can be very helpful in this practice to become ever more aware of the senses. And one way to do that is by consciously softening and relaxing. The more you relax, the more you'll feel and the more you'll notice. So you might just feel right now all the muscles of your face from the inside out, the forehead, little muscles around the eyes. Feel the face smooth. If you feel and relax your tongue, relax the jaw, just track this inner felt shift into deepening relaxation and softening. Sensing now the weight and the volume of your arms from the inside out, down through your elbows and down through the wrists. Sensing the volume of your hands and the perception of pulse, tingling, vibration, subtle energy, the space between the fingers. You might bring your attention to your belly and notice how, as you soften the belly, there's this natural movement, sense of the belly rising on the in breath, falling on the out breath. Over the next few exhalations, is it possible to soften even more on each breath moving out? Sensing from the inside the length and the volume of your legs, down through the knees, and down through the ankles. And sensing from the inside the volume of your feet, tops of the feet and the toes, soles of the feet and the heels. Again, the perception of any pulse or tingling, vibration, subtle energy. Is it possible to shift into a sense of deep receptivity, a quality of allowing? And you might now elect to turn your attention to one of these sense doors. It may be the feeling of the breath on the inside, or maybe the vibrations of the sounds right now. Maybe the tingling or pulse in the palms. For these next minutes, Is it possible to return again and again when the mind wanders to this felt sense experience of here and now, right at the point of contact with breath or sound or the feeling in the hands? As many times as your mind will engage and pull your attention into a story, that many times you can re-arrive to again soften, relax, feel, and receive. One element of this practice is to be awake to the felt sense of here and now. Yet another is to be aware of who you are as the observer, the witness of your experience. And yet another is to shift your attention from concentration and willful focus to a broadening and a widening of awareness, opening into a quality of allowing and letting things be. Is it possible to, in these remaining minutes, to expand your attention to the perception of everything that's changing? 360-degree awareness. And is it possible to be not only awake to what's changing, but to let things be, to let things flow of their own nature, deeply relaxed, at the same time alert and allowing? You might now deepen the breath. Notice the quality of presence and sense what may have shifted or changed over this last 15 minutes. And is it possible to welcome this moment, to say yes to what's here right now? As you're ready, you can deepen your breath and you can open your eyes or leave them closed if you prefer. You're welcome. There's a beautiful teaching that describes the practice of meditation as the practice of consent, consenting to what's here. This following talk is on the art of yes, and it's about this practice of saying yes to life. However, there's an interesting element that sometimes you find yourself saying no to what's arriving. But every time you're saying no, you're saying yes to something else. That's the topic of the following talk. I hope you enjoyed this talk. It's got some pretty wild stories in it. This was from a few years back. Blessings in your practice. Wonderful to be with you, and best wishes. There's a men's group. It's called M3. If any guys out there looking for a kind of a supportive group, it's Men Meeting for Meditation, M3. And it's a very cool group of guys. And they have what they call, when they have their sharings, they talk about their AFGOs. It's like, well, let me talk about my AFGO, and then the sharing will go from there. And I'll alter the words slightly, but AFGO means another freaking growth opportunity. So, I'd like to talk a little bit tonight about the practice, a particular definition of the practice, and kind of a way of practicing. And a little bit about how to engage in the practice. What are the supportive qualities for this very simple but incredibly transformative practice of mindfulness? The best definition I have run across is really kind of a two-part definition. That practicing mindfulness is practicing present moment awareness. It's the practice of here and now. The little thing to add on to that is non-judging present moment awareness. That's the practice. Coming to the here and now and cultivating a quality of non-judging awareness. It sounds so simple, but it's not. One of the many growth opportunities I had this summer was going to Europe for some adventure with my wife and for some teaching. We led a day-long retreat in Amsterdam. We had 300 people, which was really kind of fun. And then Tara gave a talk in London on her way back, and she had like 600 people. It was really kind of a wild ride. But preceding that, we kind of designed our own, Tara kind of designed our adventures. And a couple things we would have done differently. One was flying to Bologna and completely jet-lagged, having to drive through the mountains of northern Italy to where we were going. So we kind of arrived, of course, didn't sleep at all, and it was morning there. And in the exchange with the rental car agency, I had ordered a little Fiat, a small little Fiat, and I remember hearing the word upgrade, and the upgrade was to like a full-size station wagon, in these little Italian roads. And we took the back road. Incredibly dumb. At one point, somehow, as we were leaving Bologna, we ended up getting on the autostrada, on the main highway. And then we had to exit from the autostrada, and we ended up in a toll booth that wasn't manned, but you had to figure out how to pay whatever you had to pay. And of course, I don't speak any Italian, and we're getting more and more desperate because there's a lineup of cars behind us. And I pushed the information button, like the help button, and his voice said, "Of course, that wasn't any help. So that was the beginning of our growth opportunity. There, figuring that one out. We had to get out and talk to the people behind us, and it was really, really kind of crazy. Another time we were hiking on a kind of a mountain trail. We were told, oh yeah, there's Sommo Colonia is this high hike up and through the hills, but the trail wasn't really marked. So at one point we're hiking through this chestnut forest and suddenly there's no trail. And what I found was, over the days, even while we were on vacation, I was getting more and more anxious. And I didn't realize it until I was meditating. A couple of days later, we were in Florence, and I was just sort of kind of watching my mind, and I just saw how much I was anxious over the next transition that we had to navigate. And this little voice kind of appeared in my head that just said, all you have is now. And I just thought, well, let me contemplate that. All I have is now. And when I could just feel now, I could feel my shoulders start to kind of melt away from my ears. I was more aware of the sounds, and I became much more present. And that became like a mantra for me over the days of transition. In a taxi, realizing that the fee that we owed was rapidly becoming more than the money I had in my pocket to pay the taxi driver. All I have is now. It was a very powerful way of coming back. It was Mark Twain who said, the worst things in my life never actually happened. We spend so much of our time wrapped up in anxiety over what we're hallucinating might possibly happen in the future, or rehashing things from the past. And the truth is, all you have is now. And that is the essence of the practice. And it doesn't take much. Why don't we do a little 90-second meditation? If you like, you can close your eyes. And as you contemplate this phrase, all I have is now, what are the qualities of now that you can feel? This breath. These particular sounds. This matrix of sensation and feeling. Present moment, non-judging awareness. And so as you're ready, you can let your eyes open, or if you like, you can remain with them closed, whatever feels best for you. So this is really the science of presence, about training ourselves to move from the cognitive, from the story, to the actual experience of what's happening right now. And from here, tremendous things can occur. Tremendous things can happen. Rather than being trapped and confined by this rational mind, which is comparing, judging, trying to figure things out, it can give you access to presence. It can give you access to relaxation. It can give you access to creativity. It can open up doorways to intuition, to insight. So simple and not at all easy. And of course, when you practice present, non-judging awareness, you become hyper-aware of how you're not present and how you're judging. That's the practice. It reveals all the ways that you are not here and all the ways you get lost and caught up in judging mind. And this is where the power of intention, the power of remembering can be so helpful. This breath-based meditation is called anapanasati. It's the awareness of breath. And the word sati means remembering. It means remembering the breath. Remembering presence, remembering here and now, about waking up out of the dream of our hallucinations. So how we turn to meet the moment determines the quality of our experience. And I know many of us here are familiar with the teaching in practice around saying yes to your experience. Father Thomas Keating describes meditation as the practice of consent. You're consenting to what's happening. And that can be a very challenging practice, but it can be quite transformative. So I had an opportunity to practice saying yes. Part of our adventure this summer was in Tuscany and Florence, and then on Sardinia. And it was a beautiful, beautiful country and really wonderful people. The challenge for me, of course, was kind of going to a country where I don't speak the language. It reminded me when I do speak French, but when my parents back in the early 70s bought a Volkswagen camper when my father was on sabbatical and drove all through Europe. And I remember my mother telling me how in her very rusty French, the car broke down, and she went to a garage, and she told me what she said to the mechanic, and what she said was, "My car is ill. Can you heal her?" So part of the challenge of going to a country where you don't speak the language is you sound like a drunken 2-year-old when you try to speak the language. So Tara and I were invited. We were staying with friends in a little town called Bannay, which was up overlooking the beautiful Mediterranean. Tiny little village. There are really no other non-Sardinians there, really. And we were invited to a Sunday meal with friends of theirs. And it was like the perfect movie set. You know, we were in this incredible, beautiful nature preserve and looking out over these mountains. And we were the only ones who didn't speak Italian or the local language of Sard. And one person spoke French, and we kind of figured things out. But the meal was phenomenal. It was all vegetables from the garden. The wine was made by one of the people in his vineyard where he learned from his father how to make wine, and the grilled sausages were from a boar that he had killed in the mountains around there. And I mean, it was an amazing meal. Went on for about 6 hours, and then they broke out the specialty, and it was in a plastic bag. And first I remember I had this sense of like, wow, who just took their boots off? It was a really kind of a pungent smell, you know. And then they kind of opened up this container. And I grew up on a farm, and I know what a dead groundhog smells like. It smelled like dead groundhog. And this was a real specialty. It was cheese, but a special kind of cheese. It was sheep's cheese. And they consciously allow flies to lay their eggs on it. And then the eggs hatch. And so they describe them as, just little worms. It's okay. I don't eat dairy products. I haven't for decades. And so handed to me on a piece of Sardinian this white cheese. So the question was, what do I do? Do I say yes or do I say no? And given the circumstances, I said yes. So I looked at this thing, and here are these little white worms adjusting to the sunlight, you know, kind of looking around. It was, how do I describe it? It called for more red wine. I'll leave it at that. I looked it up when I got home, and the word worm is really maggot. And so it was an opportunity to say yes to an experience. I found out later as well when I looked it up on Wikipedia that they won't eat it if the maggots are dead. That means it's gone. But if the maggots are alive, go for it. Yeah. Okay. So the question becomes, there are two fundamental questions in the practice of mindfulness, and I, of course, talk about this a lot because it's so foundational. The first question you ask yourself in any given moment is, what's happening right now? What is my experience right now? Just identifying what's here. Not your story, not your embellishment, what's here. The second question, can I be with this? Can I say yes to this? Sometimes we can't, and that's okay, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I thought it might be interesting just to do a short reflection on this. If you like, you can close your eyes. And you might bring your attention to something today or in recent days or recent weeks that has been troubling for you or challenging or irritating for you. And just something on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe like a 4 or 5, not your big life trauma, but just something that's been challenging. And you might just take a moment to sort of imagine that. If you can't think of anything, you can sort of make something up just for the exercise. And then explore what it's like to say no to it. No. What's that like inside to say no? And now, what is it like to say yes to it? To allow it or make room for it? And as you do so, just track what it's like on the inside. What do you notice? What do you feel? Just take a minute for this exploration. And the sense of saying yes can simply be an allowing or making room. So if you like, you can deepen your breath. And when you're ready, you can let your eyes open. Sometimes I find saying no has got a quality of kind of a hardening or a tightness. Anyone experience that with a no? And perhaps you may have noticed that with the yes, there was kind of a different internal quality. Perhaps maybe a softening, a little bit more of an allowing, a little bit more space, maybe. Did anyone find that saying no felt better than saying yes? Yeah. So it's important to acknowledge that. There are times when no is actually a very, very healthy response, and that's just what arises. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because sometimes when things arise, our first inclination is to say no, but when we really sense, can I be with this? Can I really just be with this? You do find that there's some capacity to allow, to make room. And sometimes in our experience, we sort of have that sense of, can I be with this? And there's just a very organic sense of no. Now's not the time. Or you may find there's a certain, almost like an empowerment that happens in saying no internally. So it's important to kind of acknowledge that. We often talk of this acronym of RAIN, for those of you who might be here for the first time. The acronym RAIN, it can be very, very helpful. The R stands for recognizing or realizing what's presenting in the moment. The A is an inquiry into accepting and allowing, kind of making room. And the I is about investigation and intimacy, really turning your attention and actively investigating what's here. And there's certain technologies and ways that you can investigate. And the N is sort of the end of the equation, when you can recognize, allow, be intimate with your experience. The N is sort of a sense of non-identification. And with that, it's sort of like a letting go, of the potential of letting go. When you begin to practice present moment non-judging awareness, you begin to notice how you're not present. All of your conditioning that takes you away, all of your anxiety, all of your fear, all of the ways your mind is hijacked. And of course, you notice how the mind is caught in judging and comparing all the time. And also, what can arise sometimes in practice can be undigested memories, particularly in intensive practice. But there's material that is not integrated that comes to the surface in this practice. Sometimes it can feel too much. The conditions may not feel right to really be with it. So the practice is not about saying yes to everything that arises. But it's really sensing, can I be with this? And oftentimes, you may find another time when the conditions are different that you can be with it. When you have more energy or more concentration or more of a sense of support. So this is not a practice of just bulldozing into our experience, but really sensing how compassionately you can be with what is here. How intimately you can hold your experience and sense, how does this experience want me to be with it? This is where your practice can take you to a very transformative quality of how you're holding your life. So inevitably, trauma, undigested experiences can arise in this practice of meditation. I like to note that in my own practice, I have what I call maintenance meditation and transformative meditation. And the maintenance meditation is what I do on a daily basis that sort of assures my nostrils are going to stay above the waterline. It's just sort of that practice that I do for maintenance. And then there's the practice that I engage for transformation, which is, meditating for longer, meditating in groups, doing more intensive practice. The power of this practice is extraordinary, and you may feel called to meditation because you've read about it or heard about it. That we certainly know from all the studies of this practice, it'll change your body. When you practice on a regular basis, present moment, non-judging awareness, your physiology will shift. When you turn your attention inward and you relax, when you turn away from kind of anxious thoughts and come back to the here and now, a certain homeostasis begins to reset. You shift from the trauma response to the relaxation response. Different hormones, different neuropeptides are released in the brain. Your enteric nervous system begins to respond in very dynamic ways, and many people report more of a sense of presence, a little bit less anxious, a little more creativity. Emotional equilibrium gets enhanced. This stimulus and response opens up a little bit for people in practice. Things happen and you react. That gap can open up a little bit with the practice. Mental clarity, intuition, all get enhanced through this practice. So the practice of saying yes to your experience, I have found to be tremendously helpful. Because it brings me to my intention. What is most important to me? And this is a question we all have to move into with deeper and deeper intimacy, particularly as your life gets more complex. What's most important? As Shunryo Suzuki said, the most important thing in life is to know what that most important thing is. I'm really struck by how, in this practice of saying yes to life, of how saying no is also saying yes. Saying no may be saying yes to something else. And I thought I would just kind of lead a little reflection on this because I found it helpful for myself. When I moved down to Washington about 10 years ago, I didn't know anyone in the area, and no one knew me, and so I had some anxiety around, engaging and finding meaning and contributing and gaining livelihood and so forth. So my inclination was to say yes to kind of everything, and very quickly I got overwhelmed, invited to be on boards and doing fundraising and stuff like that, and I realized that I had to start saying no, and I felt bad. Because I felt like I was turning people down. And then I realized that by saying no, I was saying yes to something else. As I got more and more overwhelmed, and I really wanted to do more creativity and more writing, that whenever I said no, I realized I was saying yes to the creative projects I wanted to engage into. So just this morning, I ran across a little thing in Lifehacker, if you know that site, where Alexandra Franzen, I just have to acknowledge her, because she wrote a really, really cool piece about how to say no. Because we are asked all the time for our attention. I had a conversation with Jack Kornfield a number of years ago, and as you may know, he's incredibly prolific in terms of what he's turned out. We know his books and so many projects he's engaged into. And at the end of a month-long retreat, he and I were talking, and I was feeling anxious about the next thing. I was in a big transition in my life. And he said, what I've noticed is that if I do not have a clear personal intention, I start saying yes to lots of little things. And suddenly, I'm supporting everyone else in their life, but I've lost touch with what's most important for me. So this little formula, and I'll put it in the email. It's like a little form letter. That when someone asks you for something, and sometimes have you ever had the experience of someone asking you for a favor and you really don't want to do it, and you're actually feeling maybe a little resentful? Because you feel you have to say yes. So this is just a little formula that says, "Dear so-and-so, thank you for your note. I'm so happy and proud of what you're doing, and I'm happy to be invited. But I have to say no because X, Y, Z. But I'd love to support you in a different way." And then you offer an alternative of how you might be helpful and wish them well. It reminded me of a good friend of mine who was starting a new company, invited someone on a board to join his board. It was a real stretch. And he got a response from this person. And he said it was the most inspiring rejection letter he'd ever gotten in his life. And basically this guy said, "I'm so pleased and honored you would ask me to be on your board, but I have to say no, because I'm so excited about how we can transform education in this culture through this nonprofit I'm developing." And when he read that, he felt so inspired. So the practice of saying no is really a practice of asking yourself, what is most important to you? What is it that you're saying yes to in your life? And this really leads to how to cultivate present moment, non-judging awareness in your life. When you know what you want, then there's a question of what are the steps that you can take that will support that. One of my favorite lines is that enlightenment is an accident. And meditation makes you accident prone. You know. This practice is based on 4 basic tenets, the 4 noble truths, the 4 cornerstones of practice, the primary insights that the Buddha had in his awakening. The first being that suffering happens. When you come into form, suffering is part of the experience. The second is that there's a cause for that suffering. And suffering can be described as stress, as unsatisfactoriness, as unsteadiness. Those qualities of mind. It happens in human form. And there's a cause. And the cause of that stress or dissatisfaction or unsteadiness has something to do with attachment. It has something to do with clinging. Anything you're complaining about in your life, anything that's not going the way you want it to, at the core will be something you're holding on to. The third of these noble truths is the cessation of suffering. It is actually possible to let go. Whatever you're holding on to, it's possible to let go. And the fourth is that there's a path. There are technologies, there are practices, there are observations, there are restraints that will support you in that practice of letting go and reclaiming who you truly are. So what are those qualities that cultivate that? It reminded me of a story of a long time ago. There was a bishop in the church who was going out to visit monks who were out in remote locations to give them instruction, make sure they were doing things properly. And he was sailing out to the small island to visit these monks who were out there. And there were these 3 monks who were doing this chant. They were chanting the Lord's Prayer, but the words were completely garbled. And so he instructed them, and he was very irritated, but he told them exactly what the words were and how you say them. They were so grateful, and they wanted to really know how the prayer really, really worked. And so he felt very self-satisfied, at what he did in creating this instruction. And so they were rowing him out to his sailboat to kind of go on to the next place. And they started sailing away, and these 3 monks were running across the top of the water saying, wait, we forgot the words. So form only goes so far. The essence of the practice to me is sincerity. No matter what you practice, no matter what technique, no matter how long, it's the quality of sincerity that you bring to being present and cultivating this quality of non-judging presence. I think for many of us, we're called to the moment for a number of reasons. We are in times of, I think, unprecedented stress on the planet. Many of us are at a time of life where there's less time in front of the car than there is behind the car, in the rearview mirror. The complexity of our relationships, the complexity involved with our commitments, all of that require a stepping back, a pausing. So there are some things that have been proven to be helpful. One of them being a daily practice. Something you can commit to on a daily basis that will help you to remember, whatever that may be. And to me, that is one of the most intimate questions to ask yourself. What can you commit to on a regular basis? I oftentimes tell the story of when I was teaching at the World Bank for a number of years. I taught a 5-week course in mindfulness, and there was I believe a Russian woman who's a kind of a manager, and she enjoyed the classes, but she said, it's a daily practice, I have no time. And I said, well, how about 10 minutes? She goes, no, I do not have 10 minutes. I said, what about 5? Could you do 5? No, do not have 5 minutes. I said, well, we talked about mindful moments, before you answer the phone, take a breath. When you're booting up the computer, close your eyes, little moments you can build into the day. And, that was helpful. But then she came into the next class, she was all excited. She said, I have figured it out. When I plug in my electric tea kettle, from then to the time it whistles, that is my meditation time. I feel the breath, I scan the body, it's good. And I thought, that's fantastic. And then later I realized it kind of depends on how much water you put in the tea kettle. But something you can do on a daily basis. There is, I have a few handouts, I'll have more. There's an organization, they call it an organization, but kind of a supportive technology developed by Mo Ejlali, who did the Year of Living Mindfully. It's called Telesangha. You sign up for a certain time, your phone rings at that time, and you are connected to a little Sangha. And it's a facilitated meditation. They're now experimenting with some guided meditations. I have one recorded for them. And for 20 minutes, you sit with a group, and then there's a little check-in at the end, and then you kind of move on. And I know a number of people who have found this to be very, very helpful. You sort of have this commitment to whatever time you sign up for. And now there's some people, they'll kind of do their yoga beforehand, then the phone rings and they're connected. So that's a really wonderful way to engage into a practice. If you find guided meditations helpful, there's some great podcasts out there. I have guided meditations as well. There's an app called Insight Timer, which is a whole networked way that you can connect with people and create some accountability. But the trick is to find what it is that you could commit to on a regular basis. And it's always good to start with a smaller amount of time and then build the habit and see how it grows from there. The second faculty that can be very, very helpful are to find some times of intensive practice. Times when you can step away for a day-long retreat or a longer residential retreat. And in those experiences of really going deep into intensive practice, it will inspire and inform your daily practice in sometimes very, very powerful ways. And I'll be sharing different resources. I know that Tara is leading a retreat coming up in a few weeks, and I have one next month. But there are other resources that are available. To think about some time when you could just give yourself some time to really just dive in, to step away from your habits, step away from all of your, to step out of the rut into some non-traditional practices can be very helpful. And the third thing, and this is maybe the most important thing that can support you, is to be around like-minded people. You may find, as many people do, meditating in a group is a little bit easier than meditating alone. There's something about kind of the group collective that can be helpful. It's harder to get up and walk out of the room when you're surrounded by other people. Finding someone who you can talk about your practice with, that is so helpful. I know I've shared this before, but I read this study that said, you take your 5 best friends, average their income, and it's probably your income. When I read that, I thought, I need wealthier friends. But we tend to gravitate toward people who are like us. So if you can find other people who are inspired about their practice, if that's what you want, you'll find it to be very, very helpful. Just like when you want to work out and you have a workout buddy who's going to shame you into practicing or inspire you into practicing. That can be very, very helpful as well. So over these weeks with our Monday night class, we'll be exploring different forms of practice, and we'll be talking about different aspects of the practice. But what interests me the most is what I think of as pragmatic Dharma. Like, how do we apply the teachings in a way that really makes a difference? With all that's going on in the world, it seems so important, more important than ever, that we each find a way to stop and pause and to find what that is inside that nourishes us. And this practice, as far as I can tell, is one of the most effective and efficient ways to do that. So I'm very happy and inspired to be sharing this time with you, and I wish you well in your practice. If there's any way I can be of support in your practice, please feel free to let me know. I did want to mention a few things, just a few announcements before we close, and we'll close with a short meditation. The first is, as I mentioned, Tara's got a workshop or a day-long coming up on the 27th. I'll include some information about that in the mailing. Also, Donna is doing a study about meditation as a useful tool for parents of children with disabilities. If you would like to speak to her, if you could stand up just for a moment. And she'll be at the back of the room, and we have tea afterward. If you know of anyone who might be interested in the resources and the exploration, that would be really, really cool. Also, there is a study happening. If you are a long-term meditator, this is just for long-term meditators, there's a very interesting study at Johns Hopkins exploring some pretty wild stuff with long-term meditators. I'll leave it at that. But if, well, just to mention, I'll mention it briefly. It's actually exploring the effect of psilocybin on long-term meditators. If you're interested or intrigued about it, I'd be happy to talk about that with you afterward as well. We have tea and cookies and things like that afterward. Please feel free to come and stay. And just a kind of a final word about kind of the structure of the class is that the classes are offered in the principle of dana. The word dana means generosity. And it's an offering that I find really quite inspiring. In the Buddhist traditions, the teachings and the practices are considered priceless. So they're not offered for any set fee whatsoever. And the practice is really based on generosity. The teachings are offered freely. And there's an invitation for you if you would like to support the teachings. And the most important thing to me is that this class and other classes that are offered in this tradition mean that no one is ever denied access. And that's very, very important to me. This is kind of an open space for anyone who's interested. So your donation supports the church and all of their support here. It also supports IMCW and all the work that they're doing in the world. And as I like to say, it supports me and my lavish lifestyle as well. So I thank you for your support. Also, you can sign up in the back if you'd like to be on the mailing list as well. Why don't we close with a short meditation? Just noticing, again, this quality of present moment awareness. Where do you feel the breath the most predominant? And feeling the texture of the air against your skin, the sounds around you. Can you feel the space inside your thumbs and fingers? We'll close with a short reading by Bokonan. Life is a garden, not a road. We enter and exit through the same gate. Wandering, where we go matters less than what we notice. And gently now deepening the breath. And when you're ready, gently letting your eyes open. Thank you for your kind attention. It's great to be with you. Thank you for coming. Please do stay for tea and whatever they've got out there. If you have any questions about practice or any resources and so forth, I'll be around for a little while. Have a wonderful night and enjoy your week.